welcome viewers. I am Pia and you are watching NewsX. There has been a lot of buzz about a big ticket item of the central government. Yes, I am referring to the One Nation, One Election bill or the draft bill that has recently been approved by the Union Cabinet. Now, the buzz around this has commenced ever since last year when the central government had appointed a high-power committee that was led by former President of India, Ram Nath Kovind. They had come out with their report, and since then, the Union Cabinet has now given a green light to it. Now, the question is whether the government will introduce this bill or not. There are murmurs that they are likely to introduce this bill in the parliament tomorrow itself. Now, without further ado, let's in fact take a comprehensive look at the entire process of elections in India. What are the pros of this One Nation, One Election? What are the cons of it? What does the report exactly recommend? Let's, without further ado, take a deep dive. Now, first up, let's take a look at a timeline of elections ever since Lok Sabha polls are conducted. Now, this year, the polls and the results were declared on the 2nd of June. Apart from the Lok Sabha election results, state assemblies including Arunachal Pradesh, Odisha, Andhra Pradesh and Sikkim, their results were also declared. The polling had taken place the same time when the voters had gone to cast their mandate for the Lok Sabha polls as well. Now, ever since the Lok Sabha polls, elections have taken place in 4 states. That is Haryana, Jammu and Kashmir, Maharashtra and Jharkhand. Now, what's interesting is the duration. In Haryana and Jammu and Kashmir, the election results were declared on the 8th of October. That is roughly about 4 months since the elections for the Lok Sabha had taken place. But that's not all. Results for Jharkhand and Maharashtra were declared 5 months after the Lok Sabha elections, that is in November this year. There's also another election that we're looking forward to very soon, and that is in the national capital, Delhi. It is going to take place somewhere around February. That is the cutoff limit, and that is about 8 months since June 2024. And shortly after that, 1 year, 5 months since June 2024, that is somewhere around late 2025, October, November 2025, it is going to take place in Bihar. So we've seen elections since Lok Sabha polls. We are also taking a look at states that are going to go to polls after 1 year, 11 months. This is Assam, West Bengal, Tamil Nadu and Kerala. And soon after that, after 2 years and 9 months since June 2024, elections will take place in Punjab, it will take place in Uttarakhand, it will take place in Manipur and in Goa. So you can see the frequency at which elections are being conducted in India. Now, after 2 years and 11 months, so just about 2 months after polling in Punjab and Manipur, Uttar Pradesh will go to polls. And soon after that, that is after 3 years and 6 months since June 2024, Himachal Pradesh and Gujarat will go to polls. But that's not all. After 3 years and 9 months, Meghalaya, Nagaland and Tripura, and after 3 years and 11 months, Karnataka will also go to polls. So elections in India are taking place a couple of about 6-7 months gap. We have also after 4 years and 6 months. So that is just roughly 6 months short of the 2029 general elections. The elections will take place in 5 states, that is in Mizoram, in Rajasthan, in Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh and Telangana. Now, this has not always been the case. Let's take a look at 1951. Out here, I have a map. These are the administrative divisions of India as soon as it had gotten independent, when the constitution had come into force. Let's take a look at some of these. You have Uttar Pradesh over here, included what is today known as Uttarakhand. You have Bihar over here. You have Madhya Pradesh, which included parts of Chhattisgarh. You have Odisha, you had Madras, you had Mysuru, you had Bombay, you had Hyderabad. You had Maharashtra over here, Saurashtra, Rajasthan, Punjab as well, Assam, what is today Arunachal Pradesh and Mizoram and Nagaland. They were all a part of Assam earlier as well. So if we take a look at this map, and if we take a look back at history, back in 1951 till 1952, from 25th October 1951 till 21st February 1952, it was a 6-month mammoth exercise. 22 elections were held simultaneously. Now, this is the very first time that elections were held in independent India. It was quite a challenge for the Election Commission back then. Let's take a look at what exactly were the 22 simultaneous elections that were held. So, first set was in Ajmer, second in Assam, third in Bhopal, fourth in Bihar, fifth in Bombay, sixth in Coorg, seventh in Delhi. Now, at that time, elections were not held in India up until then. So, the main task was also to bring about the electoral roll in the first place. If you look at number 8, Himachal, number 9, Hyderabad, number 10, Madhya Bharat, number 11, Madhya Pradesh, 12, Madras, 13, Mysore, 14, Patiala and East Punjab States Union. So 15th was Punjab, 16th Rajasthan, 17th Saurashtra, 18th Travancore Cochin, 19th was Uttar Pradesh, 20th was Vindhya Pradesh, 21st was West Bengal, and 22nd was, of course, the general election. And let's take a look at how exactly these simultaneous polls were conducted. The total amount of voters, remember I told you the first challenge of the Election Commission was to prepare the electoral roll or the voters list. There were 17.32 crore voters that had been registered. Now, what's interesting is that the eligibility, that's the voting age cutoff back then, was above the age of 21. So, only those who were older than 21 could register themselves to vote. Now, this is a very interesting picture, because this picture over here is that of the very first Lok Sabha. These are the members of parliament of the very first Lok Sabha. The total amount of Lok Sabha seats then was 489. So, all of them, more than 17 crore people had come out in order to elect 489 representatives. And this is another very interesting map over here. This basically details the number of seats that were won by the parties that were contesting. So, the mammoth amount of seats went to the Indian National Congress. It had got the lion's share. It was obviously the party that had led the freedom movement of the country. So, you can see this map is dominated by the INC's blue. But of course, there were other smaller parties, regional parties that were contesting, including the Communist Party of India. It bagged 16 seats. The Socialist Party of India bagged 12. The Scheduled Caste Federation bagged 2, the Ganatantra Parishad bagged 6, Kisan Mazdoor Praja Party bagged 9, the Bharatiya Jana Sangh, that is considered to be the precursor of the Bharatiya Janata Party today, bagged 3, and the Hindu Mahasabha got 4 seats. So, this is how the electoral map of India looked back all the way in 1951. Now, speaking of the one nation, one poll idea and the bill that the government is trying to put forth, let's take a look at some of the pros, some of the reasons why it is considered a good thing. We've listed down 7. So, first reason, if we take a look back at history, at independence, Lok Sabha and state assembly elections were conducted together. So, we've of course gone through that list very comprehensively. The total of 22 elections were conducted simultaneously back in 1951. Reason number 2, voter turnout. Now, US data recorded a 66% turnout in presidential and state elections combined versus only 46% in mid-term states only. And I'd like to delve into this a little bit because if you look at the United States of America and their system in particular, they have elections to their Congress once every 2 years. Now, what this does is there is something called a midterm and there's something called another set of elections that coincides with their presidential election. So, the election that coincides with their presidential election has seen a greater amount of voter turnout at around 66% as opposed to the midterm elections. Now, reason number 3, the cost. Now, independent studies are suggesting that it costs about rupees 50,000 crore to conduct a national election after factoring security, deployment, etc. So this is not just the cost that is being incurred by the Election Commission itself, but you also have political parties that are contesting, they're conducting their rallies. So there's a lot of money that is pumped into elections. Reason number 4, less disruptions. Schools and colleges are often used as polling centers. Staff, especially teachers, are also deployed for polling. So that amount of time is going to be used for the election process rather than the teaching process or the educational process. Reason number 5, less governance interruption. No significant policy changes are allowed during the model code of conduct periods, which is often around 48 hours. So the government, any government, whether it's the center or the state, they cannot bring about any policy change. Reason number 6, less populism, I beg your pardon. Politicians are less likely to be in constant freebies modes. So we've just taken a look back. I just showed you the frequency of elections that are held in India that gives a window of the governments and the political parties constantly offering freebies and making promises. We are seeing this in the national capital. There is a war over reveries. Meanwhile, reason number 7, less campaigning. Elected representatives will have more time to work and use lesser time rather than being on a constant campaign trail. They can then focus on their constituencies, focus on the sort of policy decisions that are required to be taken than campaigning on the ground, organizing rallies and also organizing rallies of their seniors in their parties as well. Meanwhile, let's take a look at what are the cons, what exactly the argument against one nation, one poll states. Argument number 1, we cannot extend or curtail assemblies to implement sinking polls. Now, this is something, these are concerns that have been raised, they have been addressed in the reports as well, because to do that, you will require a constitutional amendment. Argument number 2, sinking states and the Lok Sabha polls will give benefit to national parties at expense of regional ones. This is a concern that a lot of regional parties, whether in West Bengal or whether in Tamil Nadu, Mamata Banerjee, M.K. Stalin have echoed this concern as well. Argument number 3, national and state issues are different. So campaigns and choices must also be different. So this is of course putting in the perspective that Lok Sabha elections, the kind of discourse during campaigning, during Lok Sabha elections is starkly different. The focus is on national issues. Meanwhile, for state elections, the focus is on a more concentrated amount of issues that are faced by people in the states. Argument number 4, that the cost should not be a consideration in a democratic exercise. This, of course, in counter to the argument that is raised in favor that it is a cost-consuming exercise. Argument number 5, a 5-year term should be sacrosanct. It can't, and therefore they must not hold elections only for remainder of term. That will hamper governance and it will not help governance. So, of course, taking into fact that voters are casting their vote on the basis of the thought process that the next government is going to rule them for 5 years and keeping that thought sacrosanct. Now, talking about the cost, because it's something that has come up in a lot of arguments. First, let's take a look at how much do elections cost in India. These are, of course, estimates that are quoted from the ONOP report that has been released by the high-powered committee. So, the committee has to say that the cost of conducting elections over a 5-year period, so this includes both the Lok Sabha elections as well as various state assembly elections, is somewhere about 4 to 7 lakh crore rupees. And let's put that into context a little bit, and let's also see the impact or the estimated impact of ONOP. This is also figures that we are quoting from the report itself. So they are saying that if you consider the fact that you have a 4 to 7 lakh crore that is spent every 5 years, if you hold simultaneous elections, this is expected to increase the GDP, that is the gross domestic product, by 1.5 percentage points. And what's the importance of this? Now, 1.5 percentage points of our GDP is somewhere about rupees 4.5 5 lakh crore. That is 50% of our health spending and 33.33 or 1/3 of our education spending. So this will save, simultaneous polls will save that much amount of money. Number 2, the government expenditure. So if simultaneous polls are in fact conducted, the government expenditure is expected to increase by 17.67 points, because if you save that money, you can spend that money somewhere else that is for the public good. So this is of course another statistic that has been penned down in the ONOP report. Let's also take a look at fiscal deficit. So if government spending is increased, then they're also estimating that fiscal deficit will increase by 1.28 percentage points in 2 years, both before as well as after the simultaneous elections are held. Number 4, inflation. Now, inflation on the other hand is estimated to decrease by 1.1 percentage points, and what's interesting is that inflation usually decreases during elections, whether they are simultaneous or non-simultaneous, but if they are simultaneous, the drop will be sharper. Now, in investments, the estimated increased ratio of the national gross fixed capital formation, that is the investment into capital, will in fact be equivalent to about 0.5 percentage points of the GDP. It will increase. So investments are also touted to increase. Now we've addressed the cost. Let's also take a look at the voter itself. Here what we have are figures of all of the voter turnouts right since 1951 till 2024. Back in 1951, when simultaneous elections were held, for the very first time in India, the voter turnout was 45.67%. If we take a look 5 years later in 1957, another election cycle where simultaneous polls were held, the voter turnout rose to 47.74%. In 1962, it increased sharply. This is yet another year where simultaneous polls were held. It increased sharply to 55.42, and in 1967, which is yet another year where simultaneous polls were held, it increased sharply once again till 61.04%. In 1971, there was a dip. That was the time when we had seen the first disruption in the cycles. It was at 55.27. 1977, it went up back to 60.49. 1980 dipped once again to 56.92. 1984 it went to 64.01. 1989 61.95. 1991 56.73. 1996 it was 57.94. 98 it was 61.97, and of course we are seeing in the recent elections the number has sort of stabilized. As far as its 2014 is concerned, the voter turnout was at 66.44%. 2019 rose slightly at 67.40%, and in 2024 it was 66.1%. So we can see the fluctuations in the voter turnout over the years of the 18 General Assembly elections that have been held in India. Meanwhile, let's take a look at a comparison that we have drawn out. Now, let's go back in fact to the first slide to take a look at the comparison. Yes, so these are the numbers of the state assembly elections, and I'd like to draw your attention to the states that we've picked out. As I mentioned earlier, Odisha is one such state where polls are held simultaneously, whereas in Maharashtra, West Bengal and Uttar Pradesh, the polls are not held in concurrence with the Lok Sabha elections. So taking a look at the voter turnout, in Odisha it is 74.51%. This is a state legislative assembly voter turnout. Maharashtra, which has just been held, the voter turnout was 65.11. West Bengal was 82.30 and Uttar Pradesh was 57.7%. So, but that's not all. We've also compared it to Andhra Pradesh. So you can see these are the 3 states we had picked out in comparison to Andhra Pradesh that was held in concurrence with the general election. The voter turnout was 81.86%, which is quite high compared to at least 2 of the states over here. So it also depends on the voting pattern of the people of the states, but of course we've seen that the numbers are generally higher. Now taking a look at the One Nation, One Poll report itself that was released. You can see here is the picture of the moment it was released. You have former President Ramnath Kovind, who headed the High Power Committee. You have President of India Draupadi Murmu, and you have the Union Home Minister Amit Shah. So what was the first recommendation? The government must develop a legally tenable mechanism to restore the cycle of simultaneous elections. So this is one thing that the report has stressed upon. Simultaneous polls are they must be conducted. Simultaneous elections to the House of the People and the state assemblies must be held first. So the second recommendation is that simultaneous polls to the Lok Sabha and the state assemblies must be held first. So that is where the priority should be. And then the third recommendation states that elections to municipalities and panchayats are to be held 100 days within the prior elections, that is within 100 days since the Lok Sabha as well as the state assembly elections are held simultaneously. Elections to municipalities must also be held. Meanwhile, the fourth recommendation states that the first sitting of the House of the People, that is the Lok Sabha, should be issued after a general election. So this is of course in a specific reference to the Lok Sabha, and then it also goes on to refer to the state assemblies in particular as far as recommendation number 5 is concerned, that the tenure of all state assemblies should be up to the subsequent general elections. So the state assemblies tenure must depend on the Lok Sabha's tenure in particular. Now, recommendation number 6 states that an implementation group to look into the execution of the recommendations must be constituted. These are all recommendations that have been given a green light by the Union Cabinet. Recommendation number 7 goes on to state that amendment in Article 325 for enabling single electoral roll and single voters ID card should also be done. And recommendation number 8 goes on to say that in event of a hung house or no confidence, fresh elections may be held to constitute the new house. We've seen, as in all democratic processes, no confidence motions are being held. So that of course also this report also addresses in case that scenario happens. Recommendation number 9, the Election Commission may draw a plan and estimate in advance for procurement of EVMs, VVPATs and security deployment. This refers to the logistics in particular. Of course, one of the arguments in favor of one nation, one poll or simultaneous elections is the logistics in particular. Meanwhile, let's take a look at what sort of constitutional amendments are required. So first up, Article 83 that deals with the duration of houses of parliament. So what does this state? The Council of States, that is the upper house, the Rajya Sabha, shall not be subject to dissolution, but as nearly as possible 1/3 of the members thereof shall retire as soon as may be on the expiration of every second year in accordance with the provisions made in that behalf by Parliament by law. So the Council of States, that is the Rajya Sabha, never dissolves. Our Rajya Sabha members of Parliament have a term of 6 years, and every 2 years 1/3 of the members' terms end. So it's a house that never dissolves. Meanwhile, it also, Article 83 also goes on in its second clause to address the House of the People, that's the Lok Sabha. The House of the People, unless sooner dissolved, shall continue for 5 years from the date appointed for its very first meeting and no longer, and the expiration of the said period of 5 years shall operate as dissolution of the House. So it very clearly states that the term of the Lok Sabha is 5 years, and only it shall dissolve if a motion of no confidence is approved. Now, provided that the said period may, while a proclamation of emergency is in operation, be extended by Parliament by law for a period not exceeding 1 year at a time and not extending in any case beyond a period of 6 months after the proclamation has ceased to operate. So this is of course one exception, that is the emergency that has been given. Meanwhile, let's take a look at Article 172. This is another constitutional amendment that is required that deals with the duration of state legislatures. It says that every state legislative assembly of every state, unless sooner dissolved, shall continue for 5 years from the date appointed for its very first meeting, and no longer, and the expiration of the said period of 5 years shall operate as a dissolution of the assembly. So, it's operating in the same manner as the rules regarding the Lok Sabha are also concerned. It also has a period of 5 years in particular. Legislative Council of a state shall not be subject to dissolution, but as nearly as possible, 1/3 of the members thereof shall retire as soon as may be on the expiration of every second year in accordance with the provisions made in that behalf by Parliament by law. This is also dealing with a bicameral legislature in particular. So, of course, we have taken quite a deep dive into the electoral process in India, the concept of one nation, one poll. What would it mean for India? What exactly the report has recommended, or what are the estimated economic impacts? What is, in fact, some of the pros and some of the cons. Stay tuned on NewsX for more. Of course, a lot is happening in the Parliament. Whether the central government brings about this bill or not remains to be seen. Stay tuned on NewsX for more. We're dipping into a quick short break.